Hi, it's me, Kat, and I am back to bring you another edition of Freaky Friday. And if you aren't, if you're a new subscriber and you're new to my channel, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button or subscribing, I'd really appreciate it. The whole concept of the Freaky Friday came to me because there are so many times when, as a medium, I have dreams about actually being someone other than myself. So quite often I feel like it's me, but it's not me. I'll look in the mirror and my dreams and I'll see someone completely different. And sometimes they totally catch me off guard because I realize when I first started having these kinds of dreams, I was very young. And I really didn't know quite what to make of it, and I didn't understand it until I met a psychic who was actually dating the man who was a carpenter and worked in construction, and he was working on the house that I was living in when I was very little. And she told me, it's okay, you're fine, because I didn't understand a lot of things that were happening at that time in my life. I was attracting a lot of paranormal activity. There was to myself, but I think in looking back on it, I wanted it. I wanted that paranormal activity to happen in my life because I was an avid reader when I was a little girl, and I gravitated to all things that were spooky and a little off the beaten path, so to speak, for a 7-year-old to be reading. Of course, I was introduced to Edgar Allan Poe's works via Sesame Street, of all things. And from that, it just kind of grew into more of an obsession. In fact, today I wanted to talk about Edgar Allan Poe. Just because, in my dreams, I'm not always a female. And there have been dreams while I'll look in the mirror and I see a man. It's me, but it's not me. So today, this brings me to Edgar Allan Poe because when I was young and I was really starting to get into all of the ghosts in all different, forms, whether it's a poltergeist or a succubus or an incubus, I knew everything there was to know about all these different entities and beings at a very young age. And I've always just been completely fascinated by it. But something that I didn't understand or know about was what was happening when I was falling asleep. Quite often when we think about our dream state, it's that, subconscious level of ideas and, where you work out your problems, so to speak, is during your sleep. But for me and for many other people like me, who when we fall asleep, we dream about someone else. And of course, my parents thought that the reason why I was having all of these dreams about Edgar Allan Poe was, of course, because I had an affinity for his works, and that very well may have been the case with this. Like Edgar Allan Poe, I lived in Baltimore for a short period in my life. Like Edgar Allan Poe, I actually lived in Philadelphia for a period of my life. Like Edgar Allan Poe, I love writing spooky stories. So there are a lot of similarities. I'm not saying that I'm him by any means, but I can understand his kind of mindset in the writing, and even something that has been passed down generationally in my family, unfortunately, is something called alcoholism. And I've had, my own battles with it, And I know that, you know, it runs in my family. And I know that it also was something that even Edgar Allan Poe had to deal with. In fact, he struggled horribly. What's interesting in my dreams, when I have a dream about him, I'm always wearing a very heavy coat. It's woolen. It's almost feeling like I'm overheating and the needing of something cool to drink to quench my thirst, so to speak. So, I mean, at that age, I didn't know anything about the taste of brandy or alcohol or anything to that extent. Because I was 7 years old, so it wasn't something that I knew about. So when I started talking about my dreams, people were like, but that's just, how do you even know that? Because I would talk about rum being sweet, and I would start describing the taste and the, you know, wanting a rum on the rocks. And because I would, you know, feel myself saying it even in my dreams. And, you know, my parents and their friends and family all thought it was pretty freaking hilarious that I was talking about these things, and that I much less even knew anything about it. But I think what disturbed my mother so much is because I started having such an affinity for his works, I started to withdraw a lot. I started to, the paranormal wasn't an obsession for me. It was something that I enjoyed. It was something that brought a lot of happiness into my life because it made sense to me for what was happening in other aspects of my life. However, I continued to have nightmares on a regular basis. And some of those nightmares would be staring into a mirror and not seeing myself at all. In fact, when I see it, the reflection of a man looking back at me, it was very awkward and scary. And, you know, that feeling of staring into your own eyes, into a mirror, even though you know inherently in your own mind when you wake up, okay, it was a dream, right? It was just a dream. But quite honestly, staring into that reflection, even in a bizarre old mirror that was kind of distorted and going like this and trying to look into my eye because I have something in my eye, and trying to get it out was very, it was a nightmare. I've always had qualms about anyone going anywhere near my eyes. If you were to ask any of my old friends, my mother trying to get eye drops, and you required a team effort of people, some, you know, to hold me down, someone else to pry my eye open, someone else to drop the liquid into my eye, because I would be like, seriously, I just absolutely hated anyone going anywhere near my eyes. So that was part of the reason for that, is looking into that mirror with that kind of broken, bizarre mirror of looking into a reflection that I can just very, very vaguely make out until I step over into a different area of a room where I can then see a bigger mirror, although it's one of those oval kind of antique, it's almost like a pine wood around the mirror, and seeing myself standing there as a man, and then realizing that the person that I'm dreaming about when I'm seeing this reflection look back at me was on the cover of this compilation of Edgar Allan Poe works, and I realized I'm dreaming about myself as Edgar Allan Poe. What is happening here? Very bizarre. And I never really talked about this with many of my friends. Once in a while we would discuss our dreams, but of course I never brought up the fact that I was dreaming about myself as a man, much less as Edgar Allan Poe. If I had done so, I probably would have been the laughingstock of grade school. And people were getting nervous around me anyway, because it was becoming apparent that I had some different abilities that not everyone understood. I would predict something and someone would freak out when it actually happened, and they'd say, you need to stop making these things happen. It was as if at a young age I was learning how to do law of attraction like that without even blinking an eye. And the fact that I was at that point as a medium would have more dreams about people, and as well I would get in, it's sort of like going into a trance state, and I'm not talking as myself anymore, I'm talking as speaking as someone else. And that freaked a few of my friends out, and I think honestly Jenny probably thought that I was channeling the devil himself, one of my old friends, because I would say some really bizarre things, and she would just be like, oh, I can't handle this, I'm gone. Right? So unfortunately, I know that I've really scared some people with some of those abilities, but I wanted to talk about this Freaky Friday thing, because I think some people aren't really getting the whole concept of, you know, that movie that was out, it was in the 80s, maybe 90s, late 80s, 90s, that had the mother and the daughter kind of flipped places, switched. And so that's kind of what happens to me when I am in a dream state. If I am thinking about someone as I fall asleep, especially if it is someone that's passed away, quite often I will have a dream about them, and it's me as them. It's, you know, it's completely not me in the dream. It is this other character, so to speak. So say if I'm dreaming about Marilyn Monroe, I see my life unfolding as Marilyn Monroe would see her life unfolding. So the same thing happens with Edgar Allan Poe as well. And the dream that I have is very fragmented and strange. So it's 1 minute having a bottle of alcohol, and it's another minute of being drawn to a grave and crying and just being there and just sobbing, and not being able to walk properly. Something's holding me back from walking properly, most likely being completely inebriated, and that's not something that I understood at the age of 7. And the idea of trying to cross, in my dream, I'm trying to cross the road and I can barely walk, and I can't get, and I feel myself being pulled down, and I go down into the side of the road. And this has been a dream that I've had for a very, very long time, where I just feel my feet can't move properly, and I feel like I have been I can't stay awake, I can't move properly, and it's, you know, when you're that exhausted and all you want to do is lie down and take a nap. It's sort of like I decided to lie down and take a nap in the side of the road. This is which is a little weird. So a little bit about Edgar Allan Poe and his last few days. Edgar Allan Poe, of course, did deal with alcoholism. He was actually found in Baltimore, kind of in the gutter, and dead apparently from drinking too much alcohol poisoning. So I think for myself, I understand that as, as an adult looking back on it, I can say, okay, I probably read something about that when I was a child and I internalized it, and that's why I had that dream. Most likely, and that's most likely why. What I find so fascinating about Edgar Allan Poe, of course, is the fact that he had his very first wife, Virginia Clemm, was the love of his life, and she passed away at a very, very young age. In fact, one of my dreams as Edgar Allan Poe, I'm sitting in a room and looking at a lovely girl who's playing the piano very beautifully, but then she stops playing and she just starts going into convulsions of coughing, and she actually died from consumption. She had, this is, in the 1800s, it was very common for women and men to pass away from consumption or tuberculosis or yellow fever. These were very common ailments at that time. And I find it kind of interesting to be having dreams about Edgar Allan Poe again, because here he's watching his beloved practically die right in front of him from coughing spasms. And why I say it's interesting that this is happening now that I'm having these dreams again is because with COVID, of course, a lot of people, get into coughing spasms and they lose their breath and they have a hard time breathing, especially for those who had previous conditions of, say, asthma or a COPD or anything like that, and then they end up getting COVID. It just attacks lungs. So it's like one of the first things that COVID will do to someone that has any previous condition like this. And the interesting thing for me, of course, is I have asthma. And so I completely understand the feeling of having, those kind of convulsive feelings here. And I think only once have I actually had a dream where I am grasping for breath and I can't breathe and I'm coughing so much and I see, blood actually coming out of my mouth because I'm coughing so much, which is, terrifying, of course. And if you're a child and you're having a dream like that, that's not a typical dream. There is an interesting program that is on, I believe it's an Amazon Prime, that is focused primarily on psychic kids and kids who remember their past lives. So I think it would be really interesting for a lot of people to take the time, if you have time now, write down your dreams first thing in the morning and think about the how these dreams have affected you. How long have you had these dreams? Have you had these dreams since you were a child? If you have, it might be worth it just to actually keep track of what is happening within that dream and to see if it unfolds even more so. If you have specific names, write down those names. If you have specific dates, write down those dates. And if you can get into your local library, it may be worth it to actually just go through the microfiche and see if you can find any information regarding any of these names that you are hearing in your dreams. And do some research, because sometimes it's really, really fascinating to actually find out the truth of the matter, which may be that there is some form of reincarnation with some of these dreams that's happening. And for others of us that are mediums, we of course are picking up on that spirit, and that spirit, you know, it's not like they totally take over us, but they are showing, this is what it was like to walk in my footsteps. This is what it was like to be me. And trying to, you know, uncover, you know, realities and kind of demystify in a way what actually happened to them prior to when they passed. Because I know even for myself, you know, there are some dreams in which I am someone else, and I've never been able to figure out exactly who that person is. So, you know, with Edgar Allan Poe as a child, I knew, okay, this is Edgar Allan Poe. I understood that. And I think maybe just because there were a few similarities in where we lived and the literary genius, of course, that he is. I am not by any means, but I'm certainly into all of the same works that he was reading, and avidly fascinated by his own life at a very young age. So I think for my mother, that was a little daunting, and she didn't quite know how to handle it. Of course, now in this day and age, the paranormal is something that people are really starting to open up to a lot more, and they're really starting to understand a lot more because of certain pioneers that have worked in paranormal research and paranormal investigating. I mean, if it weren't for Ed, Laurie, and Warren, I never would have become a paranormal investigator. If, you know, it's just, you know, you have to give props to those people who opened the doors, so to speak, for your own experiences that happen in your life. And so for me, I give all the credit to Ed, Laurie, and Warren, because they were the ones that I was reading about when I was just a child and really starting to become very, very interested in these happenings. And of course, this is something that my parents don't, I mean, my mom has had one paranormal experience where she's witnessed something. My father never really has. Although we had a very strange thing happen not too long ago. Last year, there was an image on a Life magazine, and the person, you know, this is back, a snapshot taken in the 20s. And looks exactly like me. But then again, I look exactly like my father's mother. And my father's mother in the 1920s was, I mean, she was kind of like me in my 20s and in my late teens, avidly into dance and music and singing and performing and vaudeville and all of these kinds of things, and socially just having fun. And so, you know, here's this photo on Life magazine, and, you know, I look identical to this person on it, and I'm staring at it and I'm thinking, I think this is my grandmother, right? But the interesting thing is as I'm looking at that photo, I'm realizing that there are other similarities between the young ladies that were in the photo as to people that I went to school with. And I kept thinking, this is just kind of an interesting phenomenon, because, you know, this girl looks like Jenna, this girl looks like Barrington, you know, and I'm like, oh my, what's happening? You know, it's kind of bizarre in a way, but I highly believe that I do believe in the whole idea of reincarnation, and that you do come back, family, lineage, people tend to come back as family or as friends or, you know, lovers. You go through this kind of passage in each time that you return back into human form, you know, and dealing with life. So I highly believe that in this lifetime, I have dealt with so many different things. The death of loved ones, that has been the most devastating, of course, is, you know, having someone that you deeply care about die, and where to turn to for comfort. So I know for myself, I turn to books to a certain extent. I turn to watching TV to a certain extent, and I will admit that alcohol became a numbing part of my world, and then realized that this is just a bad road, and this is the same kind of road that a lot of my family members had gone down, which is to turn to a substance to try and cope with all the difficulties in life. And that is not the way to do it. So for example, in that dream that I have where I'm the man that looks exactly like Edgar Allan Poe, and I'm stumbling, and I, can't get my legs to move, and I can't get myself to move properly, and I can't get across the road, and I'm stuck lying there. I can't move. I can't get up. Which is awfully sad. And for me in a dream was actually really scary, especially when I was a younger child. Now that I'm older, I can understand that a little bit more. But as I've started to break cycles and habits and patterns in my own life, I've noticed that then those dreams subside. It's almost as if your subconscious is allowing you to see through the eyes of someone else, and they have it just as badly as you do, if maybe not worse, and how they try to cope with things is just as unhealthy as what you are doing. And I personally believe that by seeing that and noting that you can actually break your own habits, because you see for yourself firsthand how it's, those habits are hurting you, and you can see as you're living through someone else that those habits are bad for them too. And gee, look what happened, in the process of living in this kind of unhealthy cycle of life. So it's about also empowering yourself to realize that you can stand in your own power, stand in your own authenticity as yourself, and not have the heaviness of your family, say, predispositions towards whether it's alcohol or food or whatever drugs, whatever unhealthy coping mechanisms there are, that there are other ways of coping. And for myself, it's this whole avenue of really exploring YouTube and expressing myself here has been amazing, because it's been a practice for me to speak about the things that I've gone through in my life and have people that understand these things that I've gone through in my life, to be able to have those conversations. And I think that's important, because quite often now, I know for myself and for other people that I've spoken to, you feel so kind of alone because you're supposed to stay at home and you're supposed to stay away from people if you're sick. But what do you need the most when you're sick? You need those healthy, you know, friends to reach out to you, not necessarily to be in your house, but to be able to speak to them, whether it's on Zoom or FaceTime or, you know, on your phone, or however you're actually corresponding. It's so vital and so important to have those healthy support systems, because they really, really do add to your own sanity and your own health. So I really urge people to be able to feel like it's okay to reach out to a friend or reach out to a family member and not feel like you have to deal with things all by yourself, because sometimes all of those things, especially if you're like me and you're sitting at home and you're alone and you're an only child and you don't have anyone that you can really just reach right out to talk to, sometimes just being able to talk to yourself and talk yourself through things is really important, because you need to be able to realize that there is so much strength in being able to help yourself, but there's even more strength in admitting that you need help, or you need advice, or you just need to hear someone else talk about the fact that they too have fibromyalgia, and they too have, you know, when you start hearing them speak about shooting pains that are going down through their legs and things, they too are dealing with things of the same kind of nature. So it's, you know, kind of like in my dream of being this man, where I'm having that feeling where I can't move my legs, like they're going numb, like I can't move, you know. Quite often, just even talking to someone about those things can alleviate the pain of it. But of course, if you're dwelling on all the pain of it, then it's just going to bring you more of that pain. So I think being able to talk about it and release it and kind of let it go to a certain extent, and allow into your life, you know, better feelings, allow into your life good vibes and, you know, all sorts of good things to come into your life, allowing good fortune and good luck and all of those beautiful things to come into your life is so important, instead of just dwelling on the fact of, oh, I'm so unlucky, I'm so unfortunate, look, this and this and this, you know, you have this long list of all these things that have happened in your life, and instead of going down that long list of all these awful things that have happened in your life, we all, you know, have, you know, awful things that have happened in our lives. And I think, quite honestly, the people that I've met that are the most successful in life are the ones that have, you know, accepted, you know, these awful things that have happened in their life, but they don't focus on it. They switch their focus to something else, or they say, this is something that my father says, and I think that, you know, I learned from him this, and I think that I want to talk about this a little further, probably in a law of attraction video. He says, I take that like it's a basketball, and I serve it up to the universe or God or whoever wants to take care of it, but it's not in my court anymore. And I think that that is a wonderful way of being able to look at all of the difficulties that have happened in your life and say, all right, I'm going to throw this ball to someone else in the universe, whether it's an archangel or a god or whatever you believe in, you know, send it up to the universe and say, you deal with it. I've had enough on my plate and I'm done, right? And I'm going to focus on something else. So, you know, for myself, I'll focus on, well, unfortunately, lately it's been binge watching a lot of shows on Netflix and stuff, but finding those areas to really focus that are healthier. So whether it's, you know, watching the Marie Kondo method on YouTube, and you start going through your closet and you start pulling out everything and taking everything into Goodwill that you really don't want, and you're just holding on to things that bring you joy in life. That is what is so vital in that whole method of dealing with all of your clutter. And I think that when we fall asleep, and if you're like me and you're a medium and you're dreaming about someone else and you're not as yourself, it's sort of like that spiritual clutter that's going around that never got solved, never got totally figured out. And here maybe that spirit is trying to give you some of the answers. So I say to people who are like me, who have these kind of Freaky Friday occurrences as you're falling asleep, is to really write everything down when you wake up, because you may find some eerie, interesting kind of things that you didn't know about. And especially if you go to look up the names and the dates, and you see that it correlates with something, if it can solve an old mystery, then how fabulous is that? And maybe you can help to find justice for someone who's so completely deserves that justice. So that is my Freaky Friday for today. Thank you so much for watching. I truly appreciate it. I'll